Grand City is where millions of people call home. So when anyone or anything becomes a threat, it's my job to help. Sure, I've got my stories like any other hero. Saving the day, fighting the bad guy, but I've never had to be on a team. No one else is coming to rescue them. This is all on me. I am the Guardian of Grand City.
Hey everybody, I'm CJ, and this is I'm not sure like the best way to explain this, but when I deal with people, talking to them or just having any kind of dealings with them at all, I generally assume that whoever I'm talking to is telling me the truth. Now, obviously that can blow up in your face pretty easily, pretty quickly, but still, I mean, that's always just been the assumption that I've had, that whoever I'm talking to, they're telling me the truth. And you really have to lay it on like pretty fucking thick before I start getting suspicious that, you know what, maybe this person that I'm talking to is full of shit. That's just the way that I am. And I think that the reason for that is what it comes down to is when I deal with people, I tend to tell them the truth. And even though, like I say, this has kind of worked against me on a few occasions, for that reason, because I typically tell people the truth, I assume that typically they tell me the truth. And that's not always the case. So I guess that's one personality hang up or personality flaw, something right there. But years and years ago, when I worked my first 9 to 5, I entered the workforce sort of armed with that disposition. I tell people the truth. I assume that they're telling me the truth. And life is all about a slow series of gradual adaptations to your environment where you kind of have to learn, as much by social osmosis as anything else, how things really work. And one of the things I've just sort of discovered over the years is that, yes, I tell people the truth 99 times out of 100, but it's wrong of me to assume that they are telling me the truth 99 times out of 100. I mean, some cases, you're lucky if you can get 50-50. So that's one problem that I took into the workforce. Another problem that I took into the workforce was because of my dependence upon telling people the truth in order to get by in life. Like, that's just the way that I've always dealt with people. I would typically give what I now realize are unnecessarily long answers to things. Like, somebody asks you a question, and you basically read them War and Peace as you answer it because you're telling them the truth. This is all useful information. And what I've come to discover is that I'm trying to think of like a bumper sticker way of saying this, but like more words does not necessarily make for a better explanation. In fact, it's actually the opposite. What I've discovered is my tendency to tell people the truth actually blinds me to or has blinded me to something, namely that people start getting a little bit suspicious whenever you give them a long answer. I mean, never mind that they might zone out or just lose interest in whatever you're saying. People start getting a little bit skeptical whenever you give them a long answer to something. The ideal, especially in the workplace, is to give someone maybe not an explanation or an answer that you can fit inside of a tweet necessarily, but basically you really do need to try to keep it as short as you can. Number one, you have to accommodate their small attention span. Number two, even if, or maybe especially because, you're telling them the absolute truth, you need to be able to fly under the radar of their bullshit detector. And so when somebody says, hey man, you showed up late today, what's up with that? Well, the truthful answer is, you were up late the night before. There was, I don't know, like a pipe burst in your kitchen or something like that. The fucking place flooded. So you had to call your neighbor friend, because he's a plumber, and have him just kind of band-aid the problem for you. By then it was 3:00 and 3:00 at night, and so you ended up getting to bed like crazy fucking late, which of course means you slept through your alarm clock. Wouldn't you know? Traffic was working against you on your way to work, and so, fucking blah, 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 blah. That's the truthful answer. But you give that to somebody, and by the way, that literally happened to me one time, but you give that to somebody and it just sets off their bullshit filter, even though it's completely true. All right. When somebody says, hey, why are you late? They're not actually asking you, why are you late? They're telling you that you're late. And what they're really doing is they're fishing for an acknowledgement of that, or maybe an apology for that, or something, right? What they're asking for, like what they're literally asking for, and what they're figuratively asking for, or symbolically asking for, they're actually two different things. And so whenever you give someone the long, boring, true story of what happened, it actually sounds like you're making excuses. It sounds like you're telling them lies and you don't want to admit to what you did. All right. The real answer that you should give, or I should have given when that happened, it wasn't, well, a pipe burst in my kitchen last night. You don't tell them that. Instead, you're like, oh yeah, sorry about that, man. Traffic was fucking berserk on the way here. Whew, sorry about that. Not going to happen again. Like, that's the answer. That's what they really want to hear. You throw in a little bit of a little Mickey Mouse excuse. You own up to what you did, even if it's not your fault, and then you just go with it, right? These are things that people just kind of learn as they go along in life. Maybe I'm just stupider than most people. I don't know. But it's just, this is one of those things I kind of had to learn for myself, right? And wouldn't you know, it started when I entered the workforce. And all of this is like a really fucking long way of setting the table on what I want to talk about here. Namely, please look at your screen. This is Tom King's tweet. Now, I read this tweet, and again, my little just psychological blind spot here is this, or something similar, really did happen to Tom King at some con. Somebody really did this. Tom King really did behave this way. And, well, I'm not going to say it, but what would you think of anybody who behaves this way and treats other people like this? Like, what would you think, right? I just took him at his word. And come to find out, there are a lot of people who are kind of raising the bullshit flag a little bit. They took one look at this tweet and they're just having problems believing Tom King's account of what happened. And this was not a problem I had. I took one look at this and it's like, I guess Tom King is telling us the truth here. And I went on my merry way. I think I even tweeted at him some kind of smart ass answer, but I didn't really invest too much more energy into it other than that. So, but as I said before, one of the rules in life that I've kind of learned over the years is that more words does not necessarily make for a better explanation. Tom King tweeted this out, and Peter Samedi, among others. Let's just put it this way. They had They had some doubts about this event as Tom King described it. And they made their doubts. Honestly, it was pretty obvious. And so from there, what happens is Tom King he adds more and more detail to this story. Some of these details, they don't exactly harmonize with other of the details. And this is just one of those moments in life when you have a really good illustration of a life lesson that I at least learned a really long time ago. This is when I said that more words does not make for a better explanation, this is why. When I said that when people hear like a really long and laborious explanation for something, they tend to assume that you're lying to them. This is why. So let's just go through this. This is the first tweet right here. Love seeing people at cons, but yesterday we had a Rorschach cosplayer who took his mask off at our table. Anyway, you can read it for yourself, right? So the next tweet, this is Tom King. I'm not going to say equivocating, but he's trying awfully hard to qualify what actually happened. And then he does it again in the next tweet. And then he does it again in the next tweet. Then he does it again in the next tweet. Then he does it again. It's just like this thing just goes on and on and on. Now, just because I tend to assume that people are telling me the truth in the great majority of cases, there are people out there that they've just burned me one time too many, and it gets to a point where I don't believe really anything that they say anymore. I mean, they just don't have that credibility. I'm not going to name names, but I know somebody who it seems that every time she leaves home by herself, she always comes back home with this really crazy story about how she was accosted wherever the fuck it was that she went by rude people who did something, or they said something, or there was some kind of drama that went on. And there are never any witnesses for this. I mean, we're talking like some pretty out there type shit, like people just seemingly randomly coming up to her, insulting her, belittling her, harassing her, etc. over, let's face it, some pretty incidental and trivial bullshit. And there's never any witness for this. There are no, the police are never contacted for this. The management of whatever place that she's at, they're never contacted about this. She doesn't have like a really good description of any of her assailants or anything like that. And it gets to a point where you're like, I think she's making shit up just so she looks like a victim or something. And you can get to that point where you just sort of wear people out. Like it gets to a level, they just don't believe anything you say anymore. And that's one of the reasons why I tend to prefer just telling people the truth, even if it makes me look like a complete idiot. I'd rather look like an idiot who's honest than a liar. I mean, I don't know why, but for some reason, it's like if people think I'm stupid, I can work with that. Whereas if people think I'm just like, they know I'm lying because my lips are moving, it's like, I don't know how the fuck to fix that, you know? And I guess the problem that I've always had is it's just such an easy calculus for me to make. It just seems, I guess, unthinkable that somebody would make the opposite decision, you know? Well, if the choice is between looking like a liar or looking like an idiot, I'll choose to look like a liar, you know? That there are people out there who are totally capable of making that decision, are totally cool with that decision. Now, I wasn't at this con. I don't know what happened. But what I do know is that Tom King is walking into this thing. He doesn't exactly have the best credibility with me in the first place, but more words does not make for a better explanation. And the more he digs into this thing, it's like, even I'm starting to think, you know what? Either this is complete and total horse shit, which is actually kind of what I'm leaning toward, to tell you the truth, or if anything like this happened at all, it didn't happen to Tom King, or if it did happen to Tom King, it didn't happen the way that he's saying that it happened. But honestly, I'm kind of leaning more towards this is completely made up from the ground up. And it's just, this guy just does not have great credibility with me. And yet, to look around on Twitter, there are people who are just lapping this up unquestioningly. Now, your boy Zach is basically leaning towards the idea that when Tom King keeps making reference to Rorschach this and Rorschach that, and masks, the Rorschach jacket and all that stuff, he's basically speaking in code. He's basically telling all of his little Twitter toadies that this is a person that it's okay to harass, mock, humiliate, and embarrass in public. He's basically, this person is fair game is what it comes down to. And that's your boy's Zach. That's your boy Zach's opinion on this. And, you know, who am I to tell him that he's wrong? But I don't know. I'm reading this, and the more he tries hard to explain his actions and exactly what happened and the whys and wherefores of everything, the more this thing goes on, the less likely I find myself to believe it. And like I say, I'm not exactly the most critical person when it comes to somebody telling stories and anecdotes and stuff like that. I just tend to believe everyone's telling me the truth. But this just does not seem believable after a certain point, you know? Especially since Tom King alludes to witnesses who don't seem to be vouching for his side of the story here. And is it really so hard to believe that Tom King might single out some rando with possibly a different political opinion than him, whether or not that's actually true? I mean, it doesn't matter. That's how he sees it, just to score brownie points with his Twitter toadies. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I personally would not put that past him. But I at least wanted to throw all that out there, since, I don't know, this seems to be the cool thing to talk about. And to be totally honest about it, this is just such a fucking weird story anyway that, I don't know, sometimes something comes along and it's just too good. So anyway, but yeah, so that's that. Thank you for watching. Subscribe, make sure you're still subscribed, comment, like, and share this video because it really helps me out. Also, you can find me on Twitter at Cole Loves Comics.